Hey y'all, welcome to 2025 and welcome back to What the Hype. We are very excited to revisit the Empyrean series for our first episode of the year because the third installment, Onyx Storm, is due out in just a couple of weeks on January 21st. So today we're going to be talking theories and predictions for Onyx Storm. I'm Laura and I'll be your host this week here with Pam. And we are super excited because we have a special guest joining us this week, Carly from Dear Fantasy Reader Pod. Thanks for joining us, Carly.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, we're going to chat all about your show in just a moment. But before we get going, we need to give a spoiler warning for today's episode. It should go without saying that this episode will contain many spoilers for the first two books in the series, Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. If you want to hear what we had to say about those books, head on over to your favorite podcast app or YouTube to check them out. We'll also be sure to include links in the show notes. So Carly, I would love it if you could tell us a little bit about your show to get us started.
Yeah, we our podcast, Dear Fantasy Reader Pod. It's my co-host Hannah, Kinsey, and I. And we are deep diving the Empyrean series. The first season was through the lens of Iron Flame. So it was as if you're experiencing it as a reread after you've read Iron Flame with like all of those details and little pieces you might have missed the first time you read it if you hadn't read Iron Flame yet. And we just did our mini season prep for Onyx Storm. We just filmed actually our last episode the other day. It was on a bunch of theories. So that should be fun for this episode. And our Onyx Storm deep dive chapters by chapters will be starting in February, and we can't wait to share all of the planned content we have with everybody. So if you want deep dive content on Onyx Storm, you know where to find us.
Yeah, that is awesome. And tell us a little bit about when you got your show started. What sort of inspired you? Was it kind of three friends coming together kind of with the love of this series?
Yeah. So what happened was there was actually two separate podcasts. So I had a little tiny podcast that I called my secret podcast, and it was called Dragon Readers. And Hannah had her Dear Fantasy Reader Pod that she did. She did the first season with another host. And then for my podcast, Dragon Readers, I needed to make some changes because I was just talking to no one. And I was just like, here's like 15 minutes deep dive on this. And people really, really liked it. And I was having a lot of fun with it. But it needed another person sometimes to talk off of, to brainstorm with. Yeah. And so I was really looking for that. And then Hannah had let me know that she was also having to find another host. And so it just kind of came together really, really serendipitously. Hannah needed somebody. I needed somebody. Kinsey and I had been talking about doing Dear Dragon Readers together. We all started talking. We found that we really loved this series. We were all taking notes the same way. We were all deep diving. We were all theorizing. And we were like, oh, wow, we should do this together. So we still have Dear Fantasy Reader Pod. And then we have the Dear Dragon Reader segment of the Dear Fantasy Reader podcast. So that's my little segment sometimes when I do like really intense 15-minute deep dives on things. But now I get to work it out with them. So it's even better.
I love that. It's the power of fandom.
It really is. And I had told Hannah and Kinsey this so many times. I feel like it was like our theme word for the month of December. But I was like, this just felt so serendipitous that like Hannah had reached out to me to be on her podcast. And then we all started chatting. And then it just all came together. And we were like, oh, this makes sense. We should also redo this together. And it just really worked out.
Yeah. Work smarter, not harder.
Exactly.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So Carly, why do you think it is that the Empyrean series got so popular so fast? I think as people who have read the books, understand the stories, we understand why. Like, we know why it appeals to all of us, but it kind of became sort of not an event. Maybe that's not the right word for it. It became kind of a phenomenon in the literary world, in the romantasy world. I just remember feeling like one day I had never heard of it, and the next it was everywhere.
So Okay, so I know Rebecca Yarros always says when people are like, why is it so popular? She's like, dragons. People really like dragons, I guess. And I don't think that's just it. I do think that's a part of it. People do really like dragons, I think. And I know Book Talk had a big part in it. She has talked before about how it kind of took off on Book Talk. But I think what people really love about the books are the way she does foreshadowing and Easter eggs. I think it just like leaves this delicious little trail of breadcrumbs to follow and theorize about and spiral on and deep dive on. And I just think it really gives people something to like talk about and discuss and maybe even disagree on where it's going, but you have a lot of fun with it. So I think that's what people really love about it.
It's so funny that you mention Easter eggs because my understanding is that in her books is not the only place that Rebecca Yarros leaves Easter eggs. And I thought we could start there in talking about what we're most excited about with Onyx Storm coming out. I noticed that over on Dear Fantasy Reader, y'all have been doing some deep level analysis of the hints that Rebecca Yarros has been dropping ahead of the book release.
Yes.
So I was wondering if you could share a couple of the really popular ones or the ones that have gotten the most attention.
Like the items people are most curious about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I definitely think it's that Violet's second signet. Like everybody wants to know Violet's second signet. And I think one of the reasons is because Rebecca Yarros has said several times that she's like, I thought it was obvious in Iron Flame what her second signet was. And I thought everybody was going to pick up on it.
What?
And yeah. And I was joking around with my co-host, Hannah. We were chatting one night about it. I'm like, I feel like she either really underestimated us or overestimated us. Like, I feel like she either overestimated us to pick up this thing that she thinks is obvious or underestimated how we were going to pick up every tiny little teeny tiny thing we see Violet doing. And then at the end be like, she's doing everything. She has every signet. I don't know. Like,
she's been trying to temper expectations recently, right? Like trying to be like, guys, like, I don't want you. It's not as exciting as you're making it seem. It's very obvious. And I just think that's so funny.
Yeah. So I think that's the thing. Everybody is desperate to know if they are right or wrong on.
Yeah.
So
one of my favorites was because I'm a big Taylor Swift fan and somebody had asked her, I guess she talks a lot about like Taylor Swift songs that she uses while she's writing and stuff. And somebody asked her right before Iron Flame came out, like what the Taylor Swift song was. And she said Afterglow. And I was like, that's interesting. And then after I read Iron Flame, I was like, that makes so much sense because obviously we know at the end that Xaden turns Venin and the bridge in Afterglow is tell me that you're still mine. Tell me that we'll be just fine even if I lose my mind. And I was like, that makes so much.
Yeah.
She like literally told us.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I had to include that because it's like, that's probably why she has so many Easter eggs in her books. She learned from the master.
Yeah, but she really did. Taylor Swift is next level Easter egger. So I love that she's doing that with her books and I suspect her social media. So I'm so excited. But when I finished Iron Flame, the song I had stuck in my head was So It Goes. And then that apparently was like one of the songs she was writing the beginning of Onyx Storm too. So I was like, oh, like that's exactly the vibe I got left off on too. So I was like, oh, I love this so much.
Yeah, no, that means you were definitely picking up what she was putting down, right?
Yeah, for sure. I hope so. I hope so. Because if I'm on the wrong track, I'm going to be so sad.
But what if it's like a pleasant surprise? What if it ends up being something really cool that you just hadn't thought of before? Would you still be disappointed or?
No. I love to be surprised. I love a good plot twist. I love figuring things out, but I also love a good plot twist. I feel like there's a thing about how like the best plot twists are obvious in hindsight.
Yeah.
You know, like you can't see them until it's in hindsight. And I remember that moment in Iron Flame where it's revealed that Xaden is the one that killed Alec at Threshing. And that was the twist that got me in Iron Flame. Cause like that was a plot point that I had kind of just lost track of because there was just so much going on.
Yeah.
That was the one that I was like, I completely forgot about this. And I was like, I didn't even think about that. And when that was revealed, I was like, oh, like out loud while I was reading it. And it was so exciting. And I love those moments. They're the best.
Well, I know that we have many burning questions top of mind as we close out the weeks between now and when Onyx Storm comes out. So I figured we could just kind of use this big chunk of the show to talk about what some of those things are. And we're also going to talk about what questions and theories we have related to the excerpt that was released a couple of weeks ago. So the first thing that kind of occurred to me was, what's the real story with Violet's dad?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
What are the real circumstances of his unaliving? I don't think he's alive. Like, I don't think they're going to pull a Brennan. Like, we already did that.
Yeah.
But there's more there.
Right. Like, you think somebody might have killed, like, somebody definitely killed him.
Yeah.
Well, Rebecca Yarros has confirmed that he's really dead. She has confirmed that in an interview. So I definitely don't think we're going to get like a Brennan situation or a Jack Barlow situation. He's definitely gone. I do think I definitely don't think he died of heart problems, which is like what's written in the book. It had to be something more. I think the popular theory is that leadership took him out. I kind of feel like there's going to be an extra twist there, personally.
Ooh. Okay.
I think, personally, I think there's going to be like kind of an extra twist of the knife for Violet, because if Violet found out her dad didn't die of heart problems, she would be surprised about that. But if she finds out it's leadership, she's not necessarily going to be surprised that they're capable of doing that, because she knows what they're capable of now. So I kind of think it's going to be someone she currently trusts.
And that would make sense based on the blurb for the book, because a lot of it is emphasizing that she's going to have to, like, there's no time to kind of debate over who she can trust and who she can.
Yeah.
So trust is going to be a major theme going forward into the third book.
Definitely. And we know Rebecca Yarros wrote like the second half of this book quite a bit to Who's Afraid of Little Old Me.
Ooh,
And so
interesting.
I think we're going to see like some sort of catalyst for Violet just kind of going into female rage and just being done with like playing nice and playing by the rules and just doing whatever it takes. So I can't wait for that, though. I want that for her character arc.
Yeah. I mean, I can understand why she'd be pissed.
Yeah.
I mean, you literally have, and I'm so sorry, I'm terrible at pronouncing.
Oh, same.
All of the names, Xaden's dragon.
Oh, Sigale.
Sigale. Thank you. You have Sigale telling Violet, be gentle with him. And it's like, what do you mean? Look at what this fool just did.
Yeah.
So I think it'll start out there, but yeah, I think it'll deepen for sure.
I think it'll be nice too to see her come into her own a little bit more, because it's not that Violet isn't proactive, but I feel like she's really been reactive in terms of like kind of almost like in the midnight hour at this point. So I think that like seeing her maybe come into her own a little bit more, lead before it's almost too late, because she's trusting in herself and in all of this knowledge that she has, would be really great for her character arc and in terms of like developing her a little bit more. Because obviously we have a few more books in the series. There's 5 planned. So the third book would be a good place for her to kind of come into her own a little bit more and stop kind of second guessing herself.
I really agree. And I think I do think there's going to have to be a little bit more of a catalyst for it, though. So maybe it's her dad, maybe it's something else, but I'm definitely looking forward to seeing Violet really stand in her own power and recognizing how powerful she is and how capable she is. So I'm really looking forward to that part of her character arc. I'm hopeful we're going to get it in Onyx Storm.
I agree. This feels like the right time for it. I do have a question, and it's like, it's related to someone we were just talking about, Xaden. So does drawing power from the source just once only make you kind of Venin?
That is a great question.
Because he doesn't look as intense as some of the other Venin we see.
Yeah. So there's like an epigraph in, I think, Iron Flame that talks about like the different, like, I don't know if you want to call them levels of becoming Venin. And it's like initiates, ASIMs. I'm not sure. I think there's a stage. I think there's a stage between like Sage and Maven. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head right now. And so essentially he has, I believe, like initiate level, but no one's sure what happens if like, what do you do? Like, can you just go back if it just like comes out? It doesn't seem like it's going to be one of those things where if he just doesn't draw, like it'll just go away.
Yeah. Well, Jack tells him there's no cure for it, right? So,
but the thing is like, it's almost like Jack wants the power. So some of it is like free will, right? That's the difference. Like, and in that excerpt that we got, that debuted over at cosmopolitan.com, Violet makes a point of noticing that she doesn't see a trace of red in his eyes. So it almost kind of, it sounds like it's very like Jekyll and Hyde, right? So it like lays dormant until maybe the thirst becomes too much and he can't help but draw from the source. I have a feeling that like when he draws again, it'll be to save Violet, because it kind of seems like he drew the first time to save her too. So
yeah, Rebecca Yarros has really described it like an addiction almost, like where there's just like this hunger for more and you'll get to a point where you can't help yourself. And so I don't know what the catalyst will be for him if he ends up drawing more. I'm not sure that he necessarily will intentionally like try to draw more power. I'm not really sure where she's going to go with that, with Xaden, with like fighting this and trying to cure this, because we know so little about Venin and how it works, and and if there even is a cure, if that's even possible. So I think it's possible we could see him doing it again to save Violet. I think that's a very real possibility, but I think the storyline is going to be focusing on like how to cure him, and maybe not in this book, but definitely in future books. Hopefully. I want to see him cured. I just want to see him cured. I guess that's why I'm focused on this, because that's what I want for Xaden.
So I had kind of a funny thought about this earlier. And if we think about like Violet and Xaden's sex before all of this, it was literally explosive. What's it going to be like now?
That's a good question. I'm afraid that we're going to get like a book of like him being a little
like brooding.
Well, yeah, or like afraid to even be near her.
Yeah,
or to be near her, sense. Like that he's afraid to be near her at all. That like Cosmo teaser we got, it seemed like there was some distance between them. Like she seemed like she didn't really, like she didn't know where he had been or what he had been doing. And so I was like, I don't know how much distance he's putting between them at this point in name of protecting
the wards
her.
Up. Right. She mentions that he had his wards up or something like that.
Yeah. He's like shields up.
But to your point, Laura, we know there's going to be a point when he caves. Like there has to be, because
there always is.
Yeah, there always is.
I have said that I'm like, if I get a book, like an entire book with like no romance side of it, I'm be sad. I'm be sad because it was such a fun part of the other two books was their romance, like overall. And I don't want to see them like separated for the whole book. I'd be really sad.
Yeah, I feel like that would only work if there was a very satisfying reunion. Like if the payoff hit, then it would be okay. But yeah, if they're just separated the whole time and there's not really any payoff for it, that would be disappointing. But I don't think Rebecca Yarros is going to do that.
No, she knows her audience.
Yeah.
She knows what we want.
That is true. Her editor wanted her to pull the throne scene in Iron Flame. And she's like, no, they will want this. And she was not wrong, because that is one of the most highlighted lines in Kindle for that whole book. Like, yeah, people love that line.
And then we would have never got that satisfying, like, comeback to Kat, too, which was badass of her.
Yes. It was so good. I love that line. That cracks me up every time.
Well, we're going to get to some more of our burning questions that we have left over from Iron Flame in just a moment after these words from our sponsors. Well, any other burning questions? I know we have some general ones here in the doc we can pick from.
Yeah, my big one is I'm sure because we're going to learn more about Venin in the third book. I don't know how we can't. I just really want to know what General Atos's deal is. Is he in cahoots with the Venin? Has he turned Venin himself? We know that the assassin that he sent was an initiate, I guess, at the very least, because looking back on it now, we realize that Violet had noticed that he had red-rimmed eyes right before he killed Nadine. So it's he has to know, and he kind of knows everything that's going on at Basgiath anyway. So I just I don't know what's going on there. I don't think that he's going to be the big bad villain, you guys were talking earlier about the twist with Violet's dad, because I just don't think it would kill her that much to find out that General Atos was responsible for murdering her father.
Oh, yeah. I think if staying on the topic, I could talk about all three of those topics, but staying on the topic of Colonel Atos, he is, I definitely think he's kind of an evil guy. And he's really got people fooled because in Fourth Wing, he seems so kind towards Violet and she sees him as a safe space, a safe person to talk to. She seems to really like him. I have a lot of respect for him. And then she sees this totally different side of him in Iron Flame where she's oh my gosh, he's just a very different person than she expected. And I wonder that because everybody's well, is he Venin? Is he, because people think Varish was Venin.
Yeah, I've seen that a little bit on TikTok.
And I can see why.
Yeah. And I totally get why people think these people are Venin, but I'm okay, but how are they hiding it? And to be clear, I think it makes sense for them to be Venin. I'm just curious how they're hiding it. So I think it makes sense for him to be Venin. I also think it makes sense for him to just be a person who likes positions of power too much within the government system he has. And that's just also kind of made him kind of an evil person. But yeah, he's a very interesting character. I'm very curious to know what his signet is because he's a writer and we haven't found out yet.
Ooh,
and so I want to know what he's capable of. And I don't have any theories on that, but I'm very curious.
It is crazy how people keep the signets close to the chest. And I constantly forget that because obviously we're seeing this world through Violet's eyes and Violet we're introduced to other first year writers. And so obviously she knows what her wings signets are because she watches them manifest one by one. And so it does kind of throw me off whenever I'm oh yeah, that's right. We don't know for a lot of these people. And it seems to be done deliberately so that, they can be they can catch other people off guard.
Right.
Yeah, I definitely think there's going to be some really fun, interesting signet reveals because I want to know, I said, I want to know what Colonel Atos is, but I also want to know what Garrick's is because we still don't know Garrick's. And I think the reveal for that is going to be so much fun. At least I'm hoping so. I'm excited to just experience how she shows us his signet or the moment that it's going to be really critical or something. I think it'll be really fun.
Agreed. Well, speaking of reveals that we're probably expecting, but thinking more about Venin, is there anyone else that we've already met at Basgiath that we think might have already turned and is just flying under the radar?
So I have theories on that.
I have a thought that makes me nervous.
Okay. I can't wait to know what it is.
But okay, so here's the thing. I have no evidence of this.
That's okay.
It just really concerns me that we see in this excerpt that they're, disguising themselves like they are scribes. And it allows them to fly under the radar. And it makes me really worried about Jacinia.
Oh, yeah. Sweet cinnamon roll Jacinia.
I have a whole theory about why I don't trust Jacinia.
Okay.
Because I'm not saying that she is a Venin, but just that I think she has her own goals and I don't know what necessarily those are. I think in Iron Flame, they were aligned with Violet's, so it didn't seem as obvious, but I don't trust her.
Okay.
I have a lot of thoughts and feelings on why I don't trust Jacinia and all of the weird coincidences that seem to line up when she's around. But I will say, I think it's suspicious that the scribes always wear these hoods that like cover their faces and hood their eyes, so you don't necessarily always see their eyes and faces. So I'm like, I wonder when that was put into place and like where the corruption in the scribe quadrant is, and like what is it? Is it being Venin? Is it something else? But like I do find the hoods that cover their eyes suspicious.
What about to that regard, what about Professor Markham? I've seen a lot of people sort of kind of like turn on that. I think that like one of the theories that I really like online is maybe that Professor Markham had a hand in Violet's dad's death, which I think would make a lot of sense because they're both in pursuit of knowledge. If he is playing double agent and is on the side of Venin, it would make sense that he would have had a hand in killing Violet's dad because he was getting a little too close to the truth with all of his research and stuff. So, and I guess it would also make sense why so many Venin were flying under the radar as scribes.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense that Markham is definitely corrupt and maybe Venin. I've thought about it a lot, and I don't feel like I have like, I feel like I'm really 50-50 on it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I could really see it either way. I definitely could see him, you know, taking out her dad. I could see Violet, that being a big catalyst for Violet because they were at one point so close and he taught her so much.
And he was willing to hide her. He even said like, like we'll figure out how to save you if you want to come over to the scribe quadrant because like you won't make it as a writer. So
yeah, I definitely think it would be really hurtful for it to be Markham. And I definitely think that's a big possibility. There's still a part of me though that think it's either going to be the marked ones who like took out the dad in revenge when they were in the quadrant because they all really, really want revenge. And the only one that doesn't seem to have that need is Garrick. And I wonder if it's because he already got his revenge. So I kind of wonder if it's going to be the marked ones, but also
interesting.
Yeah, but the dad was also researching Feathertails and the people aren't supposed to know. Like they're not supposed to know about Feathertails. No one's supposed to know. And that's a big dragon secret. And so I kind of wonder if he was taken out by leadership because the dragons told them he knows like that they wouldn't work with them if they didn't take him out because he had uncovered too much about Feathertails.
And if that's the case, is that something Taryn would know?
I don't know that he would necessarily know because like he's not like the elder of his den.
Because I was going to say that would be a gut punch.
No,
but
that
it does seem like
maybe
Andarna knows because I think the last time they brought up Feathertail, she was like conveniently silent.
Yeah, when they were like talking about her dad and the Feathertail research, she's like, Andarna's gone silent.
Yeah, she's clearly a little eavesdropper too because she was like, I heard about you before you were even born and I just waited.
Yeah, she definitely knows some things and she's so sneaky.
She is sneaky. I love her.
I love her. She gives like the strongest little sister energy who doesn't want to be left behind.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, but it's just like the dynamic of like grumpy teenager and curmudgeon grandpa is so good for her and Taryn.
Yeah, I love it so much, and she's just so sassy, and it just makes me so happy because like I think Taryn needs that. Like he needs that reality check of like I'm the biggest baddest dragon, but I have to put up with this little teenager, and there's like nothing I can do about it.
Right. And she definitely knows too. She's like, I know I've got the upper hand here.
Yeah.
She cracks me up.
Yeah. Honestly, she is one of the characters who stuck out to me, you know, from very early on after she was introduced. I just love her voice and particularly love, I mean, because it's very innocent in the first book. It's very innocent, childlike. And then in book 2, she's just like, adolescence, baby.
Yeah, she's like, I'm gonna eat these wyvern. You just watch.
Yeah, I love that part in the Cosmo teaser where she's like, when you're done with them, bring their bodies out for me to roast.
Exactly.
She's like, not now. Violet's like, this is not the time. Oh my gosh. Cracks me
She's
up.
like, hey, when you're hungry, you're hungry. You're hungry.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
girl dinner.
Let's talk about the excerpt. Actually, I was wondering, and maybe it's obvious. I don't know, but I was wondering how early on in Onyx Storm do we think this excerpt takes place?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah. So Sawyer is still in the infirmary in that excerpt.
Yeah.
So I think it's pretty early on because I'm guessing once he's okay enough to get around on his own without too much help and, healed and stuff, that they're going to just send him back to his, room to like make more room in the infirmary. Because I know it's like overrun at the end of Iron Flame. And they're using like the halls outside with like cots and stuff because there's just so many people injured. So my guess is it's pretty early on. In the teaser is pretty early on. I think we did I did a live with Kinsey when it came out because we were freaking out. We were like, because it just dropped with there was no notice. No one told. It was just there all of a sudden. And we were freaking out. And I think I had said that I think it was going to be in the first few chapters, personally.
I think that would make sense too, because we as the teaser goes on, we realize that the Venin are there to save Jack Barlow, which for me was excuse me.
What?
I really thought he was he was just the guy that they sent in on a suicide mission. Which brings me to one of the big questions that I had after reading this, which is is he there to play a bigger role? Because it seems kind of strange that they would not that Venin are not reckless. We kind of get the feeling that they are, and they're very impulsive, but it just doesn't make sense to me for them to risk it all, or risk these more high powered Venin to go in and save some guy that's just turned.
Yeah, that was really weird to me too. The only thing I can think of, the only thing that makes me think they might need Jack for more, is there's this moment in Fourth Wing where Violet realizes that Jack knows information on the Feathertails that he shouldn't have. It's information that she seems to think she's the only one that has. And I'm guessing that's because she learned it from her dad, who was researching them. And so the only thing I can think of is that he somehow has information on the Feathertails that they want, that he is holding hostage to make sure they get him out of there. So that's the only thing I could think of. And I have that is a long theory of how I think he could have those connections. I just think but I think he has connections to that information somehow. But that's the only thing I could think of, because I was how could this guy that turned Venin last school period, all of a sudden be somebody that they're sending multiple high powered Venin after to go break out of Basgiath? I'm why does he matter so much to them? Yeah. It is odd. That's the only thing I can think of, but I almost think it has to be even more than that.
And it would make sense because we've seen multiple people ask Violet about her father's research on Feathertails, and B, if she happens to know where her father's research is. So I think that that's definitely going to play a major role in the third book. I could see her going on a quest to try and find it. I don't know. I can't remember if Yaros mentions that Violet knows where his research is, or if she's going to maybe get there and realize that it's not there anymore. So she's going to have to go figure out where he hid it for safety. But I just don't see how we get past this book and have her not have to finally come upon her dad's research. She's been also searching for the book of what she thought were fables this whole time.
Yeah, I definitely think the research has to be a big part of this next book. It just feels so important. It keeps being talked about. It's been talked about since basically the beginning of Fourth Wing. And so I'm hoping that it's going to be part of this book. I think it will. I think it makes sense for it to be a part of this book. But yeah, Violet seems to think she knows where it is.
Right.
I'm scared that she's going to go to get it and it's just going to be gone. And that's going to be a part of the storyline, is finding it. But so maybe we won't get it in this book, but
oh no, maybe we get it at the end of the book.
Yeah. Or she knows where it is, and that's the cutoff point. That would be big.
Yeah, that would be a big thing for her to find it, and then the book ends and you don't get to know what's in it. And you're wait.
And then we have to wait how much longer?
I I don't want to speculate about that. That'll just make me sad a long time. Rebecca Yarros definitely deserves a break, and I'm not going to be one of those people bugging her to start writing, but it's going to be a wait. I'm mentally preparing myself for the cliffhanger already.
Yep. Time to turn to fan fiction.
Right? Yeah.
Well, speaking of breaks, we do need to take a quick break here to do some additional research and prepare for some of our predictions that we're going to make towards the end of the episode. So check out these words from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. So any other questions related to the excerpt? I know that we could probably go line by line because there's a lot going on in there. Something that stuck out to me was the dark wielder with the long silver braid. Who is that?
That is such a good question.
Plus, we keep hearing that we're going to find out about Violet's silver streak.
Mm-hmm.
So, is there a connection there? Do we think that we're going to find out the significance behind that in book 3, or do we think it's going to come later?
That is such a good question. I hope we get some answers for it in book 3. I don't know that we're going to get the whole mystery because I think it's going to be a layered issue. Personally, Rebecca Yarros said in an interview that Violet is going to, and this is, I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember the exact quote. I don't want to speak for her, but she alluded to the fact that Violet was going to grapple with the reasoning for her hair. It was going to be something hard for her to accept, was I think the tone of it.
Oh,
and
so this is a Harry is a Horcrux situation.
Yeah. I think it might be something like that. A lot of people have theorized that somebody must have channeled from Lilith while she was pregnant, and that's what happened to Violet.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very possible. I'm just wondering though if this is like a multi-layer answer of what happened and why it is why Violet's hair looks the way it does. Maybe that doesn't happen to everybody if they're channeled from. Maybe that's happening to Violet because of something different about her. So yeah, I want to know so bad. I will say there is this moment in the first book where the first time she uses her lightning on Jack during the squad battle. The lightning is described as a silver streak of death. And I wonder if that's going to have a connection back to her hair, because I just felt like the wording there was so specific and how she has silver streaks in her hair. And I was like, I kind of think that there might be a connection there to her, something to do with the lightning, the power, and her hair, just because of that description. But I'm not sure.
We definitely are going to, you're making me start to have questions about her second signet as well. That's my favorite topic. Yeah, it's actually a great topic to get into, and we definitely can, because that's one of the biggest areas where people are making predictions is around what the hell is the second signet?
Yes.
So what are the choices? What are the most popular things that people are theorizing right now?
I mean, the ones I see the most are that she has, I see some different mind work abilities, intrinsic, Trusair. A lot of people think a distance wielder. I'm trying to think. Amplifier is another really popular one. So I think those are, I'm sure there's another one that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head that are the most popular theories that people
you have one, right, Laura?
Yeah. So I have, and I've seen a couple of people bring, and it's probably more than a couple of people, so it's not my own, but her having the ability to communicate with the dead.
Mm-hmm.
And what really drives that home for me is the excerpt, because it doesn't seem like anyone else saw that silver-haired person. She just kind of disappears. And Violet has a moment where she's kind of out of body and did no one else see that? And there was that weird exchange between them too, where the girl kind of gave her a smirk when she saw her. So I was just like, is she dead? Is this the Sixth Sense?
Oh, that would be crazy.
that if it's the Sixth Sense, I love that so much. I think my brain tripped on that, was wait a second. much. I don't think that's where I'm leaning towards, but I really do understand why people lean towards that.
Mm-hmm.
I do get it. There was this moment though in an interview where somebody asked Rebecca Yarros if she was actually talking to Liam, if he was really there talking to her, if she was seeing him while he was dead. And she pointed out that Violet was on like the serum, like the signet blocking serum in that moment. And she made a point to point it out, but she didn't fully like say like definitely not. Like she has implied that it was a hallucination in interviews, but I always wonder though, I'm like, is she just trying to throw us off the scent?
That's what I'm wondering too. Because like if I were an author, I don't know if I would like show my cards, you know, unless it was like in a very specific circumstance. But I'd be lying left and right to throw people off the scent.
I think she had this joke too about how like when the first book came out, she was like Tom Holland on tour, just accidentally like her face giving everything away. And she had to learn to be better. That's kind of a niche joke if you didn't follow Tom Holland's press tours for Spider-Man. I'm sorry.
I'm very familiar. It got to the point where they wouldn't even give him full scripts.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. Or they were telling fake plot lines.
Yeah.
I know. Like, wasn't it that they told him that I don't want to give a spoiler for Avengers. We don't have that spoiler warning on the show, but there is one scene where they specifically titled it something completely the opposite of what it was in the movie. And when I saw that interview, I laughed so hard.
Yeah. I think didn't he one time have a reaction when it was one of the Avengers movies got fully leaked and someone was on Twitter teasing the idea that Tom Holland had leaked it. And he responded to that and was like, at first I saw this and I was like, oh shit, did I?
He kind of leaked the 3 Spider-Men too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause his facial expressions are not great.
No. And Zendaya just looked at him like
what are you doing? It all worked out for him though. He's engaged to her now. So everything's coming up for him.
Love.
Or at least I think so, right? I don't know that it was actually confirmed, but that's what everybody's saying.
TMZ said it. And say
they're
what you will about them.
Even
they're usually right.
Yeah. My idea with regards to Violet's signet, or like my theory, has really like jumped around because I could see like all of these making sense. To tie it into Laura's point about seeing her seeing the silver-haired Venin. I mean, it's also possible that maybe like they're both distance wielders, because we've seen a couple of times in the text that it's emphasized how fast she got somewhere. So if they both got somewhere fast, it would make sense that they would have seen each other and then the other one would have dipped, you know? But I think that like the one that's really winning out currently for me is Truthsayer, just because of how much the idea of truth is being emphasized in the blurb for the actual book that we got. And then also I think that ties really nicely into Violet's thirst and her like passion for knowledge, and the fact that that's such like a core personality trait for her. And I think it also marries really well with Xaden being an intrinsic, because they're kind of like 2 sides of the same coin. So it would make sense that they would complement each other.
Like a yin and yang.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I am really with you on this. I did like I want to say, I think it's actually 30 minutes long, but I did like a 30-minute long Dragon Readers episode back in October where I was like, listen, I made a spreadsheet of every weird thing Violet did, where I was just like, and I literally put it in categories and like added it up. And I was like, this is all the weird stuff she's doing, y'all. And it was like 30 minutes of like, she did this many times. She did this many times. And there's like so many different pieces of evidence. But when I look at it collectively, what it looks like to, like, if you try to pick something that can encompass the most of the things that she's doing, I would say she's a truthsayer. I think one, you're right. It totally fits in with her character arc in this book. Her whole world's been flipped upside down. She doesn't know what's real. She doesn't know what she can trust. she has no idea what's true anymore. All of the people she thought to trust that hold all this knowledge are all of a sudden these people who she has no faith in anymore. And I think that that's going to deeply drive like however her signet manifests. And so to me, True Sarah makes a lot of sense, especially when you look at the fact that like she seems to know when people are telling the truth. She seems to know what's about to happen. She seems to compel people to do things. It's seeming very much like a Dune level Bene Gesserit True Sarah in many ways.
And I kind of like that it works twofold, because there's also that that point where Rhiannon tells her, like, tell us the truth or at least stop lying.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that like the fact that she values speaking her truth to the people that she trusts, and also values the truth from those people, it kind of all adds up. I love all these other like second signet theories though. Like that's my issue.
Yeah.
You know, I think that they would
so
all be kind of
fun.
badass. Like,
yeah. They are all so much fun. There's so many great theories out there. And sometimes I see one where I'm like, I could have never thought of this in a million years. Like people are so creative. And it's like, and they're using real things that just, like they see in the book to like support it. And I'm just like, I would have never gotten there. Like this is so creative and I love it so much. I do think I'm settled on her being some sort of true Sarah, but I think if she's not a true Sarah, and it's like one of the things I've noticed her doing in the book, she's probably either compelling people or seeing things that are about to happen, just because those are the two I had like the absolute most evidence for of her, whatever she's doing in the book, because it's so many things. But yeah, there are some great, somebody was like, thinks that she's like a kind of like a chameleon, similar to Andarna, that like she can kind of like chameleon her signet. And I was like, that's really interesting, because she does seem to be doing a lot of odd things in the book, but I would have never jumped to that. Like she can chameleon her signet to whatever she wants, because Andarna can chameleon herself to look like any dragon she wants. And I was like, I love those connections. People have so much fun with it. And again, I think that's one of the things people love about these books is because there's so many things like that to have fun with.
And that would also even like fit into the idea of being an amplifier, because like an amplifier would kind of have to be a chameleon to help other people amplify their own signets. So
I kind of think if she's an amplifier, though, it's going to be related to her first signet, because her first signet is pure power. So I think it actually kind of fits in there more. And I think Laura, you were saying this, that like they counter each other nicely. And so I think if she's pure power, I actually don't think Xaden is wielding shadows. I actually think he can nullify power. I think that that's actually his first signet, because like when there's like a moment in Fourth Wing where she's like practicing her lesser magic, and she's like, oh, and when I feel my power brush up against Xaden's, it dies like an ember.
Ooh,
and then
that's a great call out.
Yeah, and when his shadows wrap around her in that Cosmo teaser, she's like, I feel my power being quieted.
That's so interesting. So I did not make that connection.
Yeah, and then when they're at the Viscounts and like Kat is messing with her head because she's Kat, and and so Xaden throws up a wall of shadows, and Violet's like, and all of a sudden, all of my emotions are like all those heightened emotions are washed away. And she's like, what did you do? And he's like, what I should have done from the start. And it's like somehow like his shadows blocked her power. And I was like, I think he can nullify power. So I think like you were saying, like how they kind of counter each other, but I don't think it's actually light and dark. I think it's pure power and nullify power. And I think we're going to see something similar with her second signet, that like he is an intrinsic and that she's a true Sayer.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
So I think they're going to counter.
Can you really quickly, just for anybody who's listening who needs a refresher, like what is the difference between the two? Because they're similar, but they're very different.
Yeah. So intrinsics, well, we know very little about intrinsics because they kill all of them. They don't let them live. So he has this forbidden signet. Nobody knows he has except for Violet. And they can read thoughts. They seem to be like mind readers, essentially. Xaden describes it as being able to read intentions. And he says that he like sees them in pictures. So I'm not exactly sure what it's going to look like for each different intrinsic. But the reason why I think it would be kind of a counter for Violet to be a true Sayer, for somebody who can know everybody's thoughts, like he could know all the thoughts and she could know all the truth. So I think those are like nice counters to each other. And also true Sayers, like within the mythology, should be able to completely shield their mind from anybody. And so I think that would be important for her to have if she's in a relationship with an intrinsic, to know that like she has privacy in her own mind. So
And then he's
I
telling
think
her the
nice.
truth
Mhm.
always. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah,
great.
no, they've had trust issues, so
Yeah.
that'll come in
Yeah.
handy. Well, we can't leave this episode without talking about death predictions. Sadly, like we know it's gonna happen. So is there anyone top of mind for us who we feel like is definitely on the chopping block?
I'm really worried about Mira personally, because if this is
Yeah.
following a traditional hero's journey, I just feel like all of Violet's personal heroes and mother father figures need to die before she's able to come into her own. And Mira really would be next on the chopping block because she was kind of more of a mother to her than her own mother was.
Yeah.
So the fact
now
that she
she's
survived this long, yeah, exactly.
I feel like my answer always really upsets people, but I'm leaning towards Ree.
No,
I love her.
I know that's everybody's reaction. I love Ree. She's like, if I could choose a best friend from this world, it would be Ree. She is the absolute best. I adore her. But I feel like Rebecca Yarros kind of explains Ree's character the same way she explained Liam.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
And how,
they're
like,
both
she's
like
like,
loyal to a fault. And
yeah, well, and she
yeah.
says like Liam had no more growing to do. Like he had all of his stuff together. He knew what he wanted. And she always explains Rhea as being like really grounded, having her stuff together, knowing what's important to her, like, and being a very balanced character. And I'm like, okay, but like you're starting to make her sound like you think about her like you think about Liam. And we know what happened in Fourth Wing. And I love Rhea. Please don't hurt her. But I'm scared. I don't necessarily think Onyx Storm that's what's going to happen, but I am very scared just because of those correlations. I'm scared. Do you have anybody in mind, Laura?
So I think Riddick,
yeah,
is
that would hurt
potentially, and it's because it's purely because it would hurt so much.
Mm-hmm.
I've also seen some theories or some people speculating that Dane might, in like a final redemption arc, sacrifice himself to save Violet and or Xaden, which I feel like that would be poetic. And I also feel like Dane is a character that, like, I don't know how much else she can do with him.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, and he is still struggling to redeem himself in Violet's eyes, to your point. So that would be poetic. I agree.
I definitely think Rebecca Yarros is going to punish us for like hating him so much, for the fandom just turning on Dane so much, because I know she really loves Dane, and I think she's going to like just absolutely. I think Hannah might have talked about this in our last episode that we recorded, but I 100% agreed with her that like that she is going to make us absolutely fall in love with Dane, love him, redeem him, and he is going to sacrifice himself to save somebody important in the series, and just completely rip our hearts out for disliking him so much.
I did not realize, and to be fair, I have not really like dug in on her social media or anything, but I did not realize that she was a fan, because I have hated him basically the entire time.
Yeah, she always says that she's the biggest Dane apologist, and I understand what she is saying. Like, Dane as a character, he is a 22-year-old kid. He is, I think, I always explain him as like being like an archetype of a character that you would expect to see in a military setting, like somebody who deeply internalizes a rule structure to be okay with what they're doing. But he also just makes a lot of excuses for his behavior. And I've said this several times, but I always say, like, I just want to see Dane learn to apologize without the but. Like, just apologize without also somehow saying, like, but if you had just told me, if you would have just had more, I feel like what he's saying is, like, if you would have just had more trust and faith in me than I had in you, this wouldn't have happened.
Well, because
like,
a lot of his character is also driven by jealousy. And I think that that's something that we as readers who kind of get to see everything from Violet's eyes hone in on right away.
Mhm.
And so it feels disingenuous. And that's why it's so easy to hate him and reserve a level of distrust, even now that he's kind of shown that he's, willing to like go against his own father for the greater good. I mean, like, I don't begrudge him that, but it also just feels like a lot of it is driven by jealousy and also maybe like any feelings that he still harbors towards Violet, which obviously is like not going to happen because she's head over heels for Xaden. So
yeah.
My thing with him is he just always seems so entitled. That was what really bothered me. It's like, you're not entitled to her.
Yeah, which is interesting because that has to be a product of his upbringing and circumstance. But then like Violet's mother outranked his dad, and Violet doesn't come off as entitled, probably because she was always cast aside in relation to her brother and sister.
Yeah.
But still.
Yeah, I do think we're going to get, though, some perhaps interesting backstory on Dane, because like we don't really know anything about him really, other than him and Violet were friends growing up, and we never learned anything about his mom. And I kind of suspect that there is going to be some sort of tragic backstory with his mom, where maybe he blames himself, and that's why he felt like so overbearing towards Violet. And not that it's an excuse, but I think understanding him a little better would be nice if we're going to get a redemption arc.
Yeah,
maybe that's why she's an apologist, because she knows what's
she
coming.
knows. Yeah. She's like, just you wait. You're going to love him.
Yeah. Just you wait. You're going to feel like a real piece of shit.
Listen, I'm willing to eat my words if she makes it super satisfying. So
yes.
Yeah. I do think she said something about that, like a bunch of pieces got left out. Like a lot of stuff on Dane got left out in edits.
Oh, that's so
and so I
interesting.
do think
I hope she
had,
releases that soon.
Yeah.
Like maybe like at the end or after it's not relevant anymore.
Yeah, some expanded editions or something. I would love that.
Or like on a website. Like Stephanie Meyer used to do that back in the day with Twilight, and like say what you will about Twilight, but she was really good at pandering. Like she knew her audience and she knew what people wanted. And yeah, I
didn't know that, but that's interesting. But yeah, I would love some more, like all those things that got left on the editing room floor. Maybe not all of it, but some of the things that she thought should have been left in. I'd love to see those.
Well, we've had a great discussion today. Do we have any last thoughts? Have we left any stones unturned before we wrap up this episode?
Ooh, I think we've left
many. I feel like we've left many stones unturned because there's just so many.
Oh, for sure.
I feel like we'd be here for 3 weeks if we wanted to uncover every stone, right?
Yeah. Well, see, that's where your podcast comes in, Carly, because y'all go really deep.
We do.
Yeah. So I would definitely love for you, before we wrap the show here, for you to plug where our listeners can find you and your podcast.
Yeah, we're at Dear Fantasy Reader Pod. It's my co-host Hannah, Kinsey, and I, and you should be able to find us on all the major podcast platforms. We are also pretty active on Instagram at the Dear Fantasy Reader Pod. We're over there, so you can find us there, and we love to hear from you guys. So if you find us and you enjoy it, please let us know, because we're pretty active in our DMs.
Love it. Well, how are we feeling? Are we excited
for Onyx Storm?
So excited.
I can't contain my excitement. I am barely holding it together here. That's like all I want. I'm like, I just have to make it to this book.
Well, we invite you, but we also invite all of our listeners to be sure to let us know in the comments, wherever you follow us, what you are most excited for in Onyx Storm. I think a couple of us will be hunkering down in blanket forts to embark on this third chapter, uninterrupted, hopefully. And we will be back with our Onyx Storm review episode on February 7th. So get ready for part 4 of our Empyrean series. In the meantime, please also do feel free to share spoiler-free reactions and tag us in them on social. We are What the Hype Podcast on YouTube, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok. We are also on that other social media site too, but I really think we should just get on Blue Sky. So I'll continue pressuring Andrew. He's like the keeper to the keys of our social media account creation, and then Chloe ends up making them beautiful, as she does with everything. But Onyx Storm, again, as a reminder, coming out on January 21st. So right around the corner, we are all on pins and needles with excitement. Cannot wait. And that is the hype ahead of Onyx Storm. And coming up next week on What the Hype, Eric will be your guide for a series we are all hyped for, Star Wars Skeleton Crew. We'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.